we have a few more in transit. But the point is this: even though, for whatever reason, religious liberty isn't seen, quote unquote, as sexy as some of the other departments that folks like to flock to, the reality is that without the work that is done in this department, none of the other departments could function. And your job to keep the work before the members is an important one, and I appreciate you all coming out today. As Elder Morgan indicated, Northeastern and Greater New York have been collaborating, and a fine collaboration it has been, and I'm just looking forward to next year, because I think some of the things that we've done so far give us a good platform to build on. So I'd like to invite you to stand for prayer, and then we will bring on our speaker for the day. Father in heaven, in mercy, you woke us up this morning, and you've placed the importance of religious liberty on our minds and hearts. As we have this time together, may it be time well spent. May we leave here better equipped to move this important ministry forward. We realize that some of our directors are still en route, and we ask that you grant them traveling mercies. Be with our speaker today and our program overall. Then as we look at our world and all the things that are going on, may we keep an eye single to your glory. May we not become distracted by so many things that could easily distract us, but instead may we get the work done so that when you come, folks will be ready who wouldn't have been ready otherwise. Thank you for hearing, thank you for answering, and thank you for blessing. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. If you were here yesterday, no doubt you've already met one of my favorite people on the planet. Melissa is somebody who, long before I fell in love with her, I fell in love with her dad, and just comes from a wonderful group of people. She has been blessed to work in this ministry for some time, and I am really excited about the way God has used her to help expand it, and no doubt as time remains, she will continue to have the kind of impact there that makes this ministry meaningful. Today we are delighted that she could join us and that you could be with us. She has some important things to talk about, and you will leave here today with information and resources that you can take back to your local church to move your ministry forward. And as time lasts, if we are together in this capacity at this time next year, I think you will see a redoubling of the work. And Melissa, I'm looking forward to Claude and I being able to, under God, get this thing to the place where when you come back next time, we just have the whole territory humming and just giving you a lot of good work to do. So without further ado, let's receive Sister Melissa Reid and greet her in Jesus' name.
Thank you all so much for being out here this morning. I appreciate that. First of all, how many of you are serving as a religious liberty leader for the first time this session? Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you taking on that responsibility at your local church. And for those of you that are seasoned veterans, thank you for taking on that role again, for carrying the mantle again. I agree with Lawrence that this is really important work. I feel like all the ministries of the work, and I'll be talking about this several times, about how we all work together. I really love the analogy in the Bible about how, we're all different parts of the same body, and we need each other to function effectively. And so I'll be talking about as members, as designated religious liberty leaders, we can serve effectively working with other ministries in local church, and also with working with each other in our various from one church to each other to another. And so anyway, thank you for those that are coming on board, and thank you for those who have served in years past. This morning I'm going to be talking a little bit about the role of the local religious liberty leader. And as you can see from my title slide, I like to think of it as an ambassador role. And I think that fits with the New York City environment, particularly since you have the United Nations here. For those of you that were here with us yesterday morning, we talked about how we have dual citizenship, right? Here, we are citizens of this earth, but we are also citizens of heaven. And we are serving as ambassadors for Christ, right? And that's a pretty weighty responsibility. It's a humbling responsibility, but it's an awesome responsibility. And so as a local church ambassador, that's what I want you to see yourselves as serving as the religious liberty leader of your church. So when we look at Philippians 3:18 through 20, it says, "Many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their minds are set on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ." And so the Holy Spirit has blessed you all with your various spiritual gifts and an anointing. And now so your local church has affirmed that with this particular assignment to serve as your local religious liberty leader. And so you will be witnesses both within your local congregation and outside of that in your surrounding community with this responsibility. And so in order to serve as an ambassador for Christ as the religious liberty leader, first of all, you have to, in order to serve as an ambassador for a country or for a sovereign, you have to know the king. You have to know your country. You have to have a relationship with the head of state. You have to have access to the head of state. We obviously can't witness about somebody or something that we don't know, we don't have a relationship with. So we can't accurately represent our country or its principles or our king if we don't know them ourselves. And so, first of all, as you take on this responsibility this year, I really want to encourage you to reaffirm your relationship with Christ. So spend each day, start each day in the Word of God. I really do believe that the Word of God is living and active. That's so true in my life, and I'm sure it's true in yours as well. So I encourage you to spend time in God's Word every day and pray for that daily infilling of the Holy Spirit. Really make that part of your ministry of religious liberty. I also want to encourage you, as I said earlier, to work together and to partner strategically. I love that we have these two conferences that are working together and partnering strategically. And I want you to take that and do that on a local level as well, both in church to church and ministry to ministry. This morning I was sharing with a few of you that we are doing a food giveaway at the North American Division. We're giving out 25,000 pounds of local produce, and I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail about that. I'll talk about that a little bit later when I talk about the public affairs side of work, because that's going to be something that is also part of the religious liberty ministry, is your public affairs work. It can be part of your religious liberty ministry. But why I'm bringing that up now is we are also partnering in this event that's happening at the North American Division today. We're also partnering with Adventist Community Services. We're also partnering with health ministries. We're also partnering with the Ministerial Association that's located there. And we're also partnering with the Chesapeake Conference and the Columbia Union. We're looking for all the different, and the local churches that are right there in the area. So we're not just staying in our little ministry box. We're looking for all the different avenues so that we can be as effective, we can be as an effective ambassador as possible. We want, our goal is to share Christ and to be as effective as possible. And so I really want to encourage you to, as you take on this responsibility this year, to work together and to partner strategically. Hebrews 10:23 through 25 says, "Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." Do we see the day approaching? So I really love that Claude and Lawrence have set up this message board or this email service that you all have, and I know that you were encouraged to give your email address when you came in this morning, and if you didn't, I really encourage you to do that. I get those emails as well and see all the messages that are coming through, and there's lots of great ideas and information and resources that are available there, so take advantage of that. There's so much out there that's available. And I also, like that verse that I read just said, use that to also encourage one another. This can be a lonely ministry sometimes because it is not the most popular ministry. So, you know, use it also, that message board or that email system, to just post a message of encouragement sometimes too. I appreciate those messages, and so maybe someone else might appreciate that message sometimes too. Finally, I would say to remember, and this is another verse from Hebrews. Hebrews 11 is one of my favorite chapters, and this is also pulled from my sermon yesterday, is the by faith chapter. And by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And I'm reading that because I think as we take on this ministry, we want to remember, again, going back to, this world is not our home. We are strangers in this strange land. And as we take on this ministry, I think that's an important thing to consider, that we are taking on this ministry keeping in mind that we are these ambassadors, and we have this great, wonderful place that we're representing, and we want to tell other people. We're so eager to tell other people about it because we want them to come there too, right? Religious liberty is not just a ministry because we're holding open the doors for everybody else so that they can exist. We are part of the gospel ministry. We are part of the gospel. Religious freedom is a characteristic of Christ. It's an embodiment of the gospel. And so I think that's something that's important to hold on to. So that's my little devotional aspect of this morning. So why is religious freedom important? I have several aspects that I'm going to talk about, but I just, from your all's perspective, maybe this is why you accepted your position. Maybe why is religious freedom important to you? Yes, sir. Okay, can you expand on that just a little bit? Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes as Adventists we don't realize we are right at the end of these chapters. We're now dealing with what's going on today, the politics of God. I think I remember reading something where it says, while we're sleeping, movements will be rapid and moving, and we walk unaware of what's going on. Sometimes I guess what I mean is that our people need to realize that things that we see around us have significant meaning to our salvation.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to be aware that things aren't just happening just for the sake of it.
Right. So it gives us, this ministry gives us a clarity to understanding the events of the world around us. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
We also understand that religious liberty is something that we have to be cognizant of. Anything involving freedom, is something that's a gift. This country was based on the fact that they had to fight for their freedom. And religious liberty is no different. If it can be taken away in an instant, then the Bible is talking about that. It's predicting that those things will happen.
Yes.
So we have to sound that, make that sound so that everyone understands how important religious liberty is. And it's so important, especially now, with the things that are going on, like the brother was saying, so rapidly, so, quickly, that we need to be
Okay. Thank you. And you were jumping off exactly what this gentleman said as well. It sounds like you were resonating the same reasons. And just to sum up what you were saying for our audience that might be watching online, a lot of what you were saying I heard was that resonated with what I feel as well, and what I said in my sermon yesterday too was about our freedoms here that we appreciate as Americans are not absolute. We're so grateful as Americans because we look at the world around us and they don't enjoy the same religious freedoms that we do, but they're not absolute because freedom is a gift from God. And so while we appreciate what the government affirms for us, we look at prophecy, as you all were both saying, and we know that that's not something that's going to exist forever.
Hold on just a moment. We fix the problem.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful.
I think a few appreciate it. I think most of us take it for granted.
Yes.
And because I think if you appreciate it, I think you'd have a different attitude towards it.
Yeah.
Ours is one of apathy, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Why is religious freedom important to you?
I believe it's important to me especially because it gives us the legal and political right to worship freely. Watching 3ABN in my home, I witnessed many countries, many nationalities and nations that do not have the right to be free when what they're practicing, what they believe in. And it's always like a hush-hush thing in someone's basement or house. Some are just starting a church finally. Like I saw one in Cuba. They got a big church in Cuba, and it's a very big celebration for them because that's a communist nation. And also in some other parts of the globe, it's slowly forming and being more accepting and tolerant of religions and what have you. And it's a very wonderful thing that with church and state, they recognize us as God-serving people, law-abiding citizens, and we just want to do right by everyone by letting us honor that religious right to have.
Thank you.
Also, listen to you yesterday with some of the things that you said. I also wake up this morning and it made me question myself more, meaning that what's about our security, meaning that if something just happened to come up like our Bibles and our rights are taken away just like that, where are we going to hide? Where are we going? What are we going to do? Do we stand up on that faith that we've been reading and talking about so much that we would like to be in the kingdom? So to me, my security, it makes me concerned about my security, but then I come back and say, well, as long as God is standing with me, then my security is safe. Amen. So don't be afraid.
Amen. Yeah. Amen.
I think we have to remember the past. Mm-hmm. Because when we see the suffering that Christians went through, and I'm thinking about the Waldenses, for example, and when you look at even the Second World War, we're really standing on the shoulders of a lot of people who have sacrificed. And so we have to work to maintain that standard, because if we're not cognizant of the past, we allow things to repeat in the future.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I appreciate that comment. So, as you know, I work for Liberty Magazine, and one thing that I really appreciate about our editor is that he will often publish articles that appeared many years ago, And if you are not a careful reader and don't read the byline, you will think that they have been published, that they have been written in this contemporary time because they are so relevant to what is happening on, right in this time period, because history repeats itself. So, and if we are not students of the past, we will repeat our same mistakes over and over and over again. And so I really appreciate your comment, because we need to learn those lessons and be, and honor our past as well, and the sacrifices that were made by people in the past. So I appreciate that comment very much. Anyone else? Okay, well, so I made a list of...
I'm sorry, there was one more thing back.
Yes.
Sorry.
Religion is actually a social system, conservative social system. Mm-hmm. We have another social system in this world that's called government systems. But government system is not operated by holy and religious people. So the people who are religious, who want to follow their inheritance or any other good converted religion, they need to live with their religious way, and they need to follow their religious rules for saving, protect their life, health, everything. The problem is government have a lot of rules which are against of religious rules. But government allow religion. In US they allow all kinds of religion. The US Constitution says you can practice any religion or not practice a religion. So for keeping our life safe, protect, and for living with religious way, we need religious freedom. That's why actually religious freedom is important. US have that by government. You can follow your religious rules. You don't need to follow government rules for everything. But we need government system also, because there is something we don't have in religion, in our religion system. One of them, passport ID for traveling, for driving car. That's why we need actually both systems.
Right.
But we need religious freedom also for other rules. One of them, social, family life living. One of them, marriage ceremony, marriage systems. More other rules we need follow for religious rules, because government support other false rules for those reasons. One of them, homosexuality, government do support, but our religious don't do support that. That's why we need religious freedom for getting and protect, for getting safe and protect from government rules. You can say my religion did not allow that, do not allow that, that's why I cannot support that. You don't need to go jail for that if you say that, or if you disobey those government rules, you don't need to get punished for that by government rules, because government allow religion also. Government have religious freedom in this country. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate your comment. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you saying is, in an ideal society, you live in a society where government respects your religious freedom, and so while the government is looking out for your, the way your infrastructure and your protection, your safety and things like that, maybe your school systems, or maybe your libraries and your government, your government systems and political systems and things like that, all of those sort of segments of society. It also respects other segments of your personal, things like your religious freedom, and allows you to then have that segment of society where it allows you to then be able to follow your own heart and your own conscience in that area of your life. Okay, so for me, I put together a list of why religious freedom might be important to us, and several of these things were already mentioned. But first of all, religious freedom allows everyone the opportunity to practice their faith as their conscience dictates. And again, this is something that we find, this is biblical, right? This is something that this is what God intended for us. He is a God who said, I've created you, and this is kind of incredible. He created us, and yet he allows us to determine whether or not we serve him or not. But religious freedom is important because it allows us the opportunity to practice as our conscience dictates. It's important to us because as a minority religion, it allows us to worship on the seventh-day Sabbath. In the United States, religious freedom gives people the right to reasonable workplace accommodation due to their sincerely held religious beliefs. I use some legal language there, and I talked about this in my afternoon presentation yesterday. But basically, what that means is, in the United States, sort of the biggest issue for Seventh-day Adventists continues to be Sabbath accommodation in the workplace. And the legal requirement is reasonable accommodation by the employer. And so that's very important for us as Seventh-day Adventists, is that your employer is legally required to accommodate you, required anyone's sincerely held religious belief. Whether that means, wearing a headscarf or a crucifix or any kind of religious garb in the workplace, or not having to work on their holy day, any of those sorts of things that pertain to someone's sincerely held religious belief. And that's very important. Why is religious freedom important? It allows the individual's ability to share the love of Christ with others. That's hugely important. And again, talking about, like this gentleman shared, what he's seen on television, other countries lots of other countries do not have that opportunity, or individuals who live in other countries do not have that opportunity. We are able to go out and tell other people, we're able to share with our coworkers, oh my goodness, I read this devotional today. Oh my goodness, you will not believe what, I just read in Hebrews this morning. Or you will not believe, I prayed about this thing and God answered my prayer, or the Holy Spirit has done this in my life. I can have these conversations with individuals, not just church members, but anyone I choose to have I had a conversation. I took an Uber back to my hotel last night and had a conversation with my driver, and I just shared with him why I was in town. It was just a natural conversation, and then he shared with me, oh, well, I'm a believer too. Christ cured me of cancer and this and that. It was a natural conversation, and both of us felt very comfortable having that conversation because of where we live. And whereas I've heard I've heard stories about pastors in Eastern European countries being arrested because they had the Desire of Ages sitting next to them in a cab. Very different situations. So we are very fortunate to be able to share the love of Christ with others. And we should take advantage of it much more than we do. Why is religious freedom important? Religious freedom allows someone the ability to convert from one faith to another. So again, I was born a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, but how many of you were not? Amen. That's a third of us that are here sitting in this room, and you all have chosen on your Sunday morning to come out and listen to me. I mean, amen. That you have, you have changed your lifestyle and your life completely. You've given your life to Jesus Christ, and again, in so many other places of the world, that could have meant your safety. It could have meant abandonment, like your family rejecting you. It could have meant some still did. Yes, there are still consequences. I don't want to diminish that in any way. But the ability to convert is a big deal as far as religious freedom issues go, whether it's from the government or whether it's from established, the majority religion. We talked about that yesterday. Sometimes it's not the government itself, but just the majority religious factor or a social organization. And so religious freedom is important from that aspect. Religious freedom means the government cannot legislate to hinder religious practice or favor one religion over another. Again, the fact that we're able to worship together on Sabbath morning, or that any faith group is able to worship together, that the government can't say, no, you can't worship together. I didn't mention this yesterday, but the last roundtable, Religious Liberty Roundtable meeting that I attended down on Capitol Hill, we were told about a situation in Bulgaria where there's this new piece of legislation that's going through where, much like other former communist countries, they are now the Eastern Orthodox religion has encouraged legislation that basically the minority faiths, and it's particularly targeting Protestant Christian religions, well, any minority faith really, but their legislation is going through which it says people that are not born in the country, so basically anyone that's not born in the country, and also funds that don't come from within the country, they're prohibiting that. And so no outside sources, no outside people, no outside materials, no outside religious materials, no outside funding. And so it's really prohibiting the work of a lot of faith groups. And so again, for the government, and this is the government that's doing that there in Bulgaria. The government cannot discriminate against us based on our religious convictions. Again, this is not, this is just choosing to favor one group over another. And I think I says you can't, the next one is cannot prevent our building of a place of worship based on a particular faith. I think we've seen that as far as zoning ordinances. We had a situation down in Georgia where a Seventh-day Adventist congregation wanted to build, and the local community let the zoning board know, we don't want the Adventist church there. They're not welcome here. And unfortunately, that's illegal. And so they ended up, we worked with, fortunately we have a legal team we were informed of the situation, and we were able to work with the zoning board and stand up for our rights. But it's unfortunate, and it's tough to then try to move into a community and in that sort of hostile environment. But it's nice when there are laws that exist that prevent that sort of behavior. They did end up building, yes. But so finally, my last point was, why is religious freedom important? And I touched on this earlier, is because it represents the character of God. And I had this quote yesterday from my sermon, so I apologize, but this is kind of my favorite go-to quote these days. I apologize for those of you who are here for my sermon, but you get to hear it twice. But This quote is from The Desire of Ages, and it says, "The exercise of force is contrary to the principles of God's government. He desires only the service of love, and love cannot be commanded. It cannot be won by force or authority. Only by love is love awakened." Isn't that beautiful? And that's why religious freedom is important. And again, going back to, you know, religious freedom isn't just a ministry to help other ministries. It's part of the gospel. You know, it's the character, it represents the character of God. And so I just love that quote from The Desire of Ages, because religious freedom represents the character of God. So let's talk a little bit about your role as the ambassador for the local church and serving as the religious liberty leader. So first of all, probably the thing that you are most familiar with is the annual Religious Liberty Campaign. So you actually have something that I don't have, which is the kit, the annual Religious Liberty Kit. And so you are more informed or more equipped than I am. But I think I'm about to be as equipped as you are. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see how it turned out. So again, for those of you who were here yesterday, you know that we talked about a trendy topic of citizenship and religious liberty. And we also decided to talk about a trendy topic, but in a different form. We talked about protecting the wall. You know, we talk about the wall a lot, but we talked about a different wall. We talked about the wall of separation of church and state. But we thought maybe that would be an attention-grabbing term to use. And so this image that you see here is actually a real image from Geneva, and it's honoring the wall. It's honoring many, going back to our comment about history, many of the Protestant reformers, and you will see their names listed there. Actually, the image, the wall with those names of the Protestant reformers is not accurate, but those names are not accurate. But the image of those individuals in the front there is accurate. We actually chose different names that were more relevant to U.S. history. But anyway, what we did is interview an individual, or what we did so what we're talking about, Lincoln Steed, our Liberty Magazine editor, wrote the brochure copy for us this year, and he's just really talking about our Protestant history and reminding us of our distinct, not only our Protestant history, but our Seventh-day Adventist history and our history of the separation of church and state. Because we hear a lot about religious freedom recently. And it's defined in a way that is different than Seventh-day Adventists have traditionally defined it. It's defined in a way that doesn't separate church and state. Religious freedom is more about religious freedom for me, and not for other people. It's for Christians, what I mean, but not for other believers, other people of faith. And so, while I certainly myself believe that my belief system is the correct belief system, I don't want to, based on the quote that I just read, I don't believe that enforcing that is the way to motivate someone else. I believe that love is the way, the love of Christ, and sharing that and is the way to encourage that perspective with others rather than enforcing that. So that's so here is the campaign material, and so the video that goes along with the campaign material is still in process, but what we are interviewing an individual. We've done the interview and it's just being edited now, but that's going to be on the Religious Liberty, it's going to be on the Liberty Magazine website, available for download. We've done that for a few years now. You can either stream it or play it on the website. I'm sorry, you can either download it or stream it from the website, either one. And we interviewed Holly Hallman, who is she's the general counsel for the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, and she is someone that we've worked with for many years, and we actually honored her at our Religious Liberty dinner this past year. Just a really good colleague to work with, someone that we've partnered with for many years, and their organization is another organization that has a really good, firm, biblical interpretation and understanding of the separation of church and state like we do. And so we thought she was a great person to interview and explain why that understanding is important. And so that's who we feature in our Religious Liberty campaign video. But just to explain to you the annual Religious Liberty campaign a bit. So there is an annual offering. We are very blessed because as a department, we have an annual offering that takes place on the fourth Sabbath of every January. The fourth Sabbath of every January. So not all departments get that, but we also do not, it is our only source of funding. We don't have a line item budget within the North American Division. Like, our salaries are paid for, but that's it. It's really critical to us as far as funding goes, that people are supportive, and so we really, that's why we travel around and promote it, and that's why we really encourage you all to promote it as well, because this is really our one chance to be able to, promote this, to promote both the ministry, and it's the single source of funding for Liberty Magazine as well. And so this offering, so we put together this promotional material. We mail it out to all the local churches, or to the conferences or the unions, depending on which union you're in. In the Atlantic Union, we mail it out to the local conferences, and you all have these packets in your hand. And then we ask the local churches to promote on that day. We ask you, or we encourage you, not just to promote on that day, but maybe a few days or a few Sabbaths. Because you're not just, while that Sabbath is designated as the annual official offering date, you certainly can use a few days if you want, as long as you designate on your tithe off, on your giving receptacle. We actually include one, but you can use a tithe envelope as well, as long as you indicate religious liberty on it. Then you can use any day. You don't have to use this particular date, January 26th. You can use, like, if, for example, your pastor has something else going on that week, then you can use a different date. Please don't skip the Religious Liberty Sabbath because January 26th doesn't work for you. Yes, sir.
What I usually do is, yes, I usually kick off our campaign.
Wait, yes.
Oh, I forgot. What we usually do, and I happen to be so lucky this year that my pastor is also the religious
Amen.
liberty director.
Yes.
But
if we could only clone that.
Right, but what we do is we'll start the campaign out on the 4th Sabbath, January.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually will continue the campaign for another 4 weeks. Like during announcements,
Oh, praise the Lord.
I'll get a couple of minutes during announcements just to remind people. And for those who weren't there last week, here's a brochure. So I usually get it, continue for about 4 more weeks after that, and then I close down shop.
Oh, that's lovely. I like that a lot. Yes. So we have the brochure, as this gentleman mentioned. We have the brochure that what we encourage the conferences to order is one per every 2 church members. And so those are available to your local church. And then each of you in your kit has this, which basically walks you through. There's a pull-out poster that you can include and to put on your bulletin board in your church. There's instructions for how to sort of go through the campaign, how, different dates to consider. There's instructions for your local church treasurer as far as how they participate, what they do with the funds. There's articles for you to consider, just to inform you, to better inform you about what's going on as far as religious freedom issues go. There's copies of the Freedom Bond, which is if people want to receive the magazine. I really encourage you. For some reason, individuals feel like they're only supposed to sponsor subscriptions to Liberty Magazine. Please encourage your church members to sign up for the magazine themselves. It's a good magazine. There's really interesting articles, and it's a great resource for themselves. As just the gentleman said, he was, one of the reasons why he became a religious liberty leader is because he recognizes how it ties into end-time prophecy events, and reading the magazine helps you recognize where we are prophetically. It provides that information for you. And so I would encourage you to sign up for a subscription yourself. I would encourage you to encourage your church member to sign up for a subscription for themselves. It's $6 an issue. It's $6 a subscription for a year. It's pretty inexpensive. And so, as they're sponsoring the subscriptions, I would encourage, please ask them to consider that for themselves as well. If you are the person that your pastor, if you're the person that's giving the religious liberty sermon, this year Elder Wilson has written the sermon. So if you want to use his sermon, you can do that. If you can make it your own, that's what I always encourage people to do, or you can read it verbatim. Or if you have, you've been inspired and want to do that, you have your own sermon, that's the best option, That's always the best option, is to use your own material. But anyway, Elder Wilson has his sermon in here. He gave this sermon, so we had a the International Religious Liberty Association had a religious freedom event 2 years ago now, and he actually spoke on Sabbath and gave the religious liberty. He gave this sermon on that Sabbath, and so he's given us permission to use that. Yes, sir.
Just a moment.
Not as we're going to discuss, you made mention a lot about the separation of church and state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some of us, we know that this president and the vice president, they are in their intent of changing that law.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any information that we can pass on to the church, educate the church about this law that they are trying to nullify?
Right. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we are very opposed to that, and any time that there's any propose legislation against that, we always stand in opposition to that. There's not anything right now, I mean, they speak about that generally, but there's not anything that's moving through legislatively that's, you know, that we can stand up against. They just generally speak against that, you know, whether, like, Jeff Sessions has just been removed from his, or asked to be removed from his position. He resigned, but that was something that he always, or that not he always, but he did say, you know, that he was opposed to, he would speak against that. But there is not a particular piece of legislation that right now is calling for the, you know, broad, you know, the wall of separation being removed from that's, yeah, so as a general rule, we stand against the separation of, you know, we stand for a firm separation of church and state. But there's not anything right now. So whenever there's any sort of piece of legislation that sort of chips away at that, we stand in opposition to that.
Okay, what about the idea of sending information to Treasury Department not to penalize church bodies that actively play a role in politics? Whereas we know that as a religious body organization, we are not supposed to encourage political discourse from our pulpit.
Right.
But I read where at some point in time they have direct the Treasury Department to not to penalize these church bodies that want to talk politics from their pulpit.
Right. You're talking about the Internal Revenue Service and the Johnson Amendment is what you're talking about. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church did, again, oppose that as well. So we have stood in opposition to that. Okay. So moving on to the campaign, or continuing on with the campaign kit.
She has a hand.
I'm so sorry.
We do want to encourage you, though, if you have questions related to her presentation, we want to keep it there because you will have time later on for outside of that.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about, so just to sort of give a structure of how I was doing things today, we're talking about your role as the local religious liberty leader and different suggestions of what you can, of things you can do as a local religious liberty leader. Then I was going to talk about NARLA and that role. Then we were going to talk about public affairs. Then we were going to talk about legislative work. And then we were going to talk about international issues. So that was kind of sort of be the function. That was going to be sort of the structure of the order.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on his question because I also had that question to ask. And it is that with regards to church and state, I know the evangelicals, I understand that they had got the religious, the non-profit status to stay in place, and it would not affect them, but they could always speak and become politically active. Yes. So how is that? I was not sure if it was just a presidential order or it was going through Congress, because I really don't know, and I've been asked that a couple of times, and I really didn't know what to say.
Okay. It is on her list of things to talk about today, so we're going to let her stay with the roadmap, but thank you for that.
Right. Okay. So let's just, we'll just stay with the Religious Liberty Campaign right now, and then we'll deal with legislative issues probably after lunch, because I think we only have access to the PowerPoint before lunch. Okay, so the campaign, I like the idea, or I'm going to go back to the idea of keeping it a series of several days or several Sabbaths and an ongoing thing. And one thing that I wanted to talk about was the online resources. So what you have in your kit is you have the brochure, and then you have this thing here. Oh yeah, so here in this page here is you're going to get, this is your subscription order form, and this is for new subscriptions. And then this is basically something that not only this is for subscriptions that your church already sponsors, and this is basically a simulated version of that. So you're going to get a printout from your church that looks very similar to this. And this is going to be the list of sponsors of subscriptions that your church already sponsors. And so you're going to go through this list, and you're going to say, well, this person is not in this position anymore, or this church member doesn't want to receive this magazine anymore, or he does want to receive it. And so you're going to say keep, or change, or you're just going to update this list, the current list. And then anybody that's new, you're going to include on this list. So 2 different lists. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
I understand that the campaign goes up to January 26th. Or it launches January 26th.
It launches, yes.
Is there a cutoff point, like March, April?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And if you turn to page 4 in this booklet, you will see that under tips on number 2, there is a deadline of March 15 for all of your subscription information to be turned in. So March 15 is when you need to have all of that information in to your local conference, whether that is Greater New York or Northeastern. And that is because all of your subscriptions, that's an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked it, because all of your subscriptions, your Liberty subscriptions, begin with the May-June issue. And so all of the information needs to get in by March 15 in order for that information to be processed so that then the subscriptions can begin on time. Thank you for asking that question. And then the other thing that I will mention at that same time is there's that second date that's right next to it, and that's something to alert your church treasurer to, and that's the deadline of March 31. And that's when all of the money that's been raised needs to be turned in to the local conference treasurer. So 2 different dates, March 15 and March 31. There you go. There you go. Okay, so let me just make sure that we have everything that's covered within there. Let me just browse through the magazine very quickly. So I want to talk about, so if you see on the screen there, the online resources. So a lot of times, unfortunately, even though you're getting the magazine, you're getting the kits right now, sometimes, and I know this is not true of any of you that are sitting here, but maybe some of your colleagues, they won't look at this material until maybe Friday night before they're going to present on Sabbath morning, or maybe Thursday before they're going to present on Sabbath morning, and they'll realize, oh, I didn't, or maybe they won't even look for the material or realize, and so they'll be scrambling right before our Religious Liberty Sabbath, and they'll realize they don't have the material maybe, and so that's okay, because we have libertymagazine.org, and they can download a lot of the material. Not all of it. It's not an ideal situation, but they can download a lot of the material there at libertymagazine.org. The ideal, and this is why we send out the material, is to get the packets in advance, because not everything is available there online. But if you go to libertymagazine.org, there is a tab that says Campaign Resources, and that's where you'll find the video, the promotional video. The promotional video is available in Spanish and English, as is the campaign kit. And so a lot of the promotional material is available there as well. As is last year's campaign material. So let's say that you want to, again, like let's say that you're promoting for a couple of weeks and you maybe want to use a video at a prayer meeting, at prayer meeting, you liked last year's sermon or promotional video, testimony from last year so you want to use last year's, you can play last year's information as well. So one other item that's in the kit is this envelope. So you can mail all of this material back to the correct place. And that's in there as well. Yes, sir?
Online subscription. What about online subscription? Last year, I encouraged some of my members to go on the website and do their subscription. Mm-hmm. The issue was the local church or the local conference was not, there was no what icon to check, okay, I belongs to, let's say, Northeastern or Greater. Would there be any commendation for that? So at least the local conference can get what the numbers right, because there's some folks who would do this subscription online. That doesn't go to the local conference of the church.
Right.
Melissa, I think I can speak for Claude myself on this. He and I worry about a lot of things, but I can pretty much assure you that when it comes to getting the journal out, he and I are not going to lose any sleep over, who gets credit for what. Our burden and our mission is to get the journal out, to get the funds in for the offering, mm-hmm. and whatever will facilitate that, mm-hmm. we are fine with it. So if you have found that using the online resource makes your members more apt to do it, I would say keep at it. But again, the thing he and I are really concerned about is making sure that those funds are collected and sent in, because as she pointed out, those funds really do underwrite the whole process.
Right. It is unfortunate, and I empathize with you, because when you subscribe online, you're not able to get the $6 subscription rate. If you subscribe online, you get a $7.95 subscription rate, and that is just unfortunately, that's our subscriber services is through the the Pacific Press Publishing Association, and they just don't offer, their database system doesn't offer us that option to be able to get into, check which conference in which local church and all of that. We don't have access, through to an online system like that. We're only able to give you access through the print, through hard copy. And so I empathize with the situation. I wish it were different. And so if your church members choose to subscribe online, they will end up paying like our traditional $7.95 rate, which is not that much more. But it will not be attributed to the local conference, and their subscription, so they won't appear on the regular church list, and they'll pay the higher rate. Those are sort of the two differences, but that's unfortunate because of the system that that the Pacific Press uses. Those are the two limitations. So I apologize for that.
So in that case, then, you can encourage them to go the traditional route, and it'll save them, and your church will get the credit.
Okay, so as far as other things that you can do on planning your Religious Liberty Emphasis Day, or weeks or month, depending on how long you're going to be able to, how long you can work with your local pastor and local church to emphasize religious liberty there. So, first of all, during your Sabbath school hour, so this is something that I like to do, to think of, to encourage your church to think of religious freedom from an international perspective. So, first of all, you know how on the back of your quarterly you have whatever your 13th Sabbath offering is involved in? So, you know how, so yesterday we were talking about how the Pew Forum and the State Department both put out a list of countries that are, they refer to them as countries of particular concern, or countries that are have high rates of persecution or religious freedom issues. And so whenever I look at the back, that map on the back of my Sabbath School Quarterly, I look and consider, are any of those countries, what are the religious freedom issues involved in those countries? And so that's something that you don't even just have to do, during the January period, but I would encourage you to ask your Sabbath School superintendent so you can highlight religious freedom throughout the year. Just say, hey, once a quarter, can I have 15 minutes to talk about what's going on in the countries that we're, in the division that we're highlighting for 13th Sabbath this year. And so whether you're talking about a class discussion, or whether you're talking about a particular mission story that you've found, or even just, again, this doesn't have to be a Seventh-day Adventist issue. Unfortunately, you probably can find one, where we have a church or a church member that has a particular issue that, or a struggle. The Adventist Review, the International Religious Liberty Association website, both of those, the Adventist.org website, all of those are good resources to find Adventist-related articles for International Religious Liberty Association, International Religious Freedom issues. But any kind of, again, it doesn't have to be Adventist-related. Liberty Magazine, again, has great international stories, but I think this, again, helps local church members realize these are issues that go well beyond, quote, just I need Sabbath off from work. Yes, ma'am.
I find that as you have on this here for the planning of the religious liberty, I notice the best part that I just get a lot out of is in the Sabbath school. Like the Sabbath stories. When you read the Sabbath story, they have some beautiful stories in there.
Yes.
And I find that they showed off that more than religious liberty. To me, they don't pay attention to the religious liberty. Mm-hmm. It's more the Sabbath school story, the mission story also. Mm-hmm. Those two areas I find is more extended, and at least I love it. I read it more than anything else because I don't know much about religious liberty, but I'm just hearing about it not too long ago. Mm-hmm. But you got to know more about that before you could even get to the mission story. Mm-hmm. So.
I think a personal emphasis, always having a personal testimony, a personal tie-in to an issue, always helps. It helps me relate to an issue, and so that's why we always put together a video or a story, and so that's why I encourage this component when you're planning your Religious Liberty Emphasis Day. And I think when I go on and share more, again, having a face or a name when I was sharing yesterday, and we were talking about a situation in Korea, and a young person who has taken his case to the Supreme Court in Korea for having not having to take his exams on Sabbath. Again, you're sharing a situation. This personalizes a religious freedom issue in another country for somebody, and so they can relate. A young person can relate to, yeah, I'm trying to go to medical school too. You know, like, I get that. I understand, and now I understand what's happening in this country, and, you know, I can understand. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so during your divine worship hour, you can always show the campaign video. I always encourage showing the campaign video as leading up to probably the week before, or, you know, as a kind of a teaser event, or showing it before you take up the offering as well. We always talk about honoring, if you have the opportunity to honor a local civic leader as well. If you have somebody in your community, and I know that you all are great about doing this because you are great about having relationships with your local community leaders as well. Just recognizing their service for religious freedom. I mean, if you don't have that relationship, or if they're not good about religious liberty work, or, you know, then don't honor them. But if you have those ties to community leaders, or if you don't have them, then now's the time to establish them. You know, my director, if any of you have interacted with him, his catchphrase or his mantra is, public affairs are, we want to make friends before we need friends. And, you know, that's what we want to do as far as the work of religious freedom is, you know, we want to establish those relationships before we need those relationships, right? So let's build those relationships with our community leaders, and then honor them as part of our Religious Liberty Emphasis Day, and just say, thanks for your service to our community. It's probably a pretty thankless job, and so it doesn't have to be a big deal. We just say thank you, and it can be to any sort of, it doesn't have to be the most important, you know, biggest person in the community, but anybody that does any sort of, you know, civil service work. Yes, sir. You. Oh, yeah. Here, I can.
Oh.
Melissa, I just wanted to mention, one of my concerns in this area is, please do a little homework so that you understand who you're honoring. It's so common for a church to say, well, we just should have somebody, so let's get the chief of police, or let's get the fire chief, or let's just get somebody, and give some thought to it. Learn what the person's been involved in, learn what they've done that could be relevant to religious liberty or to the needs of your church, but make it a meaningful occasion, not just because for anybody that's in public office, they have an awareness that sometimes when we have an event, that if we just bring them in and give them a little plaque and say thank you, they know that the next day we'll forget about them and they won't have to worry about our attitude or our concerns. There needs to be an ongoing relationship is essential to success in influencing these people.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Yes. I would also encourage you, be sensitive of when you are honoring somebody during the calendar year and the year that you're doing it, and probably not during their campaign season right before election time is probably not the time to do it. We don't want to, as we were talking about the gentleman and endorsing candidates, we do not want to appear in any way as we're endorsing anyone running for political office. And we don't want to give them the opportunity to campaign at our local church. And so we really want to be sensitive to that as well. So we want to probably, maybe, that's something to really be aware of. So let's use common sense, honor people for the work that they've done, and only if they've done it, and so okay. So, and then we, of course, have Preach the Religious Liberty Sermon. The ideal, of course, is to have your local pastor do that, because that means that your local pastor cares about religious freedom, or at least for that morning. And so that's a real, unfortunately, it can be a real challenge sometimes. I'll speak frankly about that. But it's a wonderful opportunity for church members to be able to hear about religious freedom for a morning. And I'm thrilled whenever I have an opportunity to be able to come and speak at a local church. You know, like I said to Jackson Heights yesterday, to be able to come to the same church twice in 2 years is a thrill, you know, is an honor to me. I feel like, you know, they're my adopted New York home now. But it's even better when a local pastor, I mean, that's part of my job, is to be able to travel to local churches, and I love to do it. But it's even better when the local pastor is communicating to his congregation that this is important to him or her. You know, this is something that matters to them. And so I really like to see that happen as well. Yes, ma'am, sir.
If by some chance if we aren't able to get our local pastor to preach on religious liberty emphasis day, can we ask for your assistance and ask that you would come?
Yes, of course. Yes. As long as we're available. So, thank you. Yes, so there's many of us that travel and are happy to come. Like I said, it's one of my favorite things that I like to do, and I have several colleagues that travel as well. So, you know, we're very willing and available to do that.
Can we be first on your list?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your initiative. Okay. So moving on to our afternoon presentations. And so we had Sabbath morning, we had a delicious meal for potluck, but hopefully we didn't eat too much, so we're staying around for our afternoon presentation. So we have an update on our court cases or legislation that may impact religious freedom. I'm going to have a slide later that has a list of all of where you can find your resources to get that information. Online, opportunities, just more information. Of course, you all are all signed up for Liberty Magazine, but then there's going to be a whole bunch of websites and social media options and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so you have all this information on court cases and legislation. So then you probably, unfortunately, have church members who have personally experienced whether it's workplace accommodation issues or they might have actually been in situations, you know, they have immigrated from countries where they personally experienced religious discrimination or religious persecution, maybe themselves personally or their parents. They can share those personal testimonies. Again, we were talking about, you know, sometimes the legislation and the court cases can kind of be a little lofty and esoteric, and the personal testimonies appeal a little bit more, you know, it's like something you can resonate with a little bit more. So sharing those personal testimonies is something that I encourage as well. And then a prayer vigil, again, partnering with another ministry. If you have a strong prayer ministries team, I would encourage, if they're, you know, as you've done your research and you realize there's a situation going on somewhere. We talked yesterday about the Ukraine and the sensitive issues that are, you know, what our church is facing there right now. You know, have a prayer vigil for the, you know, our church members that are experiencing struggles, and really lift these individuals up in prayer, and their challenges. Or if you know about church member, maybe the individual that just shared their testimony and they're currently experiencing a workplace challenge right now. This is the time. We know the power of prayer, and this is the time to really lift these individuals up in that way. So each year in Washington, D.C., we have something called the Religious Liberty Dinner. And I think this is the 16th year that we've had this. And there on the, I think that's your left, is Senator Orrin Hatch. That's from a few years ago. And he's going to be retiring this year. But he's the senator from Utah, and he spoke a few years ago. And then we have Dr. John Gratz, who's the former he's the former director of Public Affairs and Religious Liberty for the General Conference, and then Elder Wilson, and then someone you may recognize in the middle there, Representative Charlie Rangel. And this is an event that we hold in Washington, D.C. As an awareness for our colleagues there in Capitol Hill, again, to highlight religious freedom. The people that we invite are, as you can see, members of Congress, but also individuals that work in the State Department. The State Department has a section that deals specifically with religious freedom issues, international religious freedom issues. And then we also invite members of the diplomatic community, and also our colleagues that deal with religious freedom issues that are represent other faith groups. I mentioned the International Religious Freedom Roundtable that I participate in. It's an informal roundtable that we all meet together, and sometimes we can partner together when there's particular pieces of legislation that we can work as a coalition informally, and try to work together to either stand together to try to get passed or opposed, depending on our positions. But this particular event highlights religious freedom on Capitol Hill for these people that influence policy. And it's something that we are proud of. And the reason why I'm showing you it is because at the Spencerville Church there in Washington, D.C. area, they decided to do something called the Festival of Religious Freedom that kind of mimicked the Religious Liberty Dinner. And basically, they decided to do a musical component. They have this beautiful pipe organ, and their ministry to the local community is music. And so they invited at that time was their member of Congress, and they honored her. But they put on this musical program, and all the music was themed around freedom and their commitment to religious liberty. And so they decided to mimic our religious freedom dinner, but on a local church level, by highlighting the same issue, but on a local level. And so that's what I was thinking. Particularly, you might want to do at your local church level, or if you worked in tandem with a couple of other local churches, maybe if you worked with your local, even if you worked as a region, something that you might want to do. But it's something that worked well there at the Spencerville Church. You don't have to, it's just any way that you can think of you know, you don't have to do the exact same thing, but something that you can do on a smaller scale, or just take one little component of and tie in to do at your local level. So, where are we at time-wise? Yes, sir. Okay, and I think we're going to go till 12:30 and break for lunch. Is that right? Okay. So, another suggestion is starting a local NARLA chapter. And what I have, let me tell you a little bit about NARLA. So NARLA is the North American Religious Liberty Association. And basically, it is a way, it's an advocacy organization that is part of the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Department of the North American Division Office. And it is a way for church members like yourself to become involved personally, sort of like a hands-on opportunity for you all to be involved in the work that we do. And so basically, we want to get everybody excited about the work of religious freedom, and then people say, well, how can we get involved? And NARLA is that conduit. And so we encourage people to start a local NARLA chapter in their area churches, or in their schools, or in their youth groups. And so what NARLA does, and I have a handout, but I don't know if we have access to make copies or not. I don't know.
What we can do, we can make sure that from both offices that we copy it, and for those that are here, we'll get it, but also those that weren't able to make it, there are some who are watching online right now. I'll make sure that the whole territory gets it, yeah. And we'll post it online too.
Perfect, perfect, okay. So let me tell you a little bit about what NARLA does nationally. And so first of all, I guess the biggest thing, were you coming to make copies? Awesome. Thank you. So our biggest event is that we have an annual Religious Liberty Summit on Capitol Hill. And what we have done, I say on Capitol Hill, and we've actually switched that. So what we are doing, we have been doing it on Capitol Hill, and just this last year, we actually did one in Riverside, California area, and we decided to go every other year regionally, because we found that we were having the same people attend, or not always the same people, but a large number of the same people attending every year in Capitol Hill, and we thought we really wanted to reach a more diverse audience and a larger number of people, and so we thought it can be expensive to attend, to come to Washington, D.C., and both to travel to D.C. and to stay in D.C., and to take off work. And so we thought if we can do regional events, then we can reach a larger group of people. And so every other year, we're now going to be going to different locations. So we'll be in we'll be in the Washington, D.C. area this coming year in 2019. But then the following year, we're going to be in the Indianapolis area, which is 2020, which is when General Conference session will be there as well. So we'll be tied in to that. So the annual Religious Liberty Summit, to tell you a little bit about that, what this coming year, 2019, what it will consist of and what it traditionally has consisted of is we have an annual lobby day, so if there's particular pieces of legislation that deal with religious freedom issues, then based on the individuals who are coming and participating, based on where they live, their zip codes, and we find out who their representatives are, and we arrange for visits to their members of Congress, and we talk to them about the pieces of legislation that we're concerned about, and so as a group. And so we prep in advance, so with the individuals, our summit attendees, about how to visit with your members of Congress, what the piece of legislation itself, what do we want to get across, what our message is, and so we have that advocacy day. Thank you. That's important. I need that one. And then we also will have panel discussions with myself and my colleagues, just updating everybody, much like we're doing today and much like we did yesterday, about what's going on domestically and internationally with issues, letting everybody become aware of the things, the political and landscape for religious freedom. So just like an educational component as far as religious freedom issues go. We also have an aspect as far as dialogue with other religious freedom advocates that are non-Adventist. We have had great participation with a lot of our colleagues. Again, I'm from the Baptist Joint Committee. I mentioned Holly Hallman earlier. Also from our Hindu colleagues, our Jewish colleagues, and another Baptist organization that I'm thinking of. So it's great to have these panel discussions, and a Baha'i organization I'm thinking of as well. And for our participants to recognize just the diversity of perspectives, but also that we can all work together for this common goal, even though we have such distinctive faith perspectives. And so then we have we always include a Friday night and Sabbath component to our Religious Liberty Summit. And I think that that's important because, again, the whole reason that religious freedom is so important to us is because our faith is so important to us. And so we bring in a special guest speaker for that. And so for the past several years, Spencerville Seventh-day Adventist Church in Silver Spring has been our host. And they've agreed to do that again this coming year. And so that has been the big, and I'm sorry, kind of the key, or not the key, the sort of the big event of the Religious Liberty Summit is the Religious Liberty Dinner that I mentioned earlier. And so as a summit participant, you also get to attend the Religious Liberty Dinner. So you get that's kind of a fun thing that you get to sit in on. There's a little gnat that keeps bothering me. So if you see me like doing that, that's what that's about. Anyway, so that's a fun event, and if you to participate in, I know a few of you have come down and participated in that previously, and I would encourage you, as a group, maybe get a couple of you and maybe try and participate in that this coming spring. That's going to be in April, I believe. We're going to be beginning the push for that in January, so you'll see on social media a push for that. But we do have some challenges as far as NARLA goes. We one of the reasons that we've started doing things regionally is because we've had a decreased participation in the summit. As I mentioned, there are challenges as far as the cost, and I think also another challenge probably is just taking the time off work. I think people are very busy, and getting the time off work, you only get so many vacation days, and to use them to come to DC and be away from your family, and that's a big ask. And so anyway, we've seen a decreased participation in attendance at the summit, and so that's one of the reasons that we have decided to switch to doing it regionally every other year. But one thing that we are looking at or wanting to do, that I'm wanting to do as the person that heads NARLA, is really look to NARLA to be a vehicle to engage the young people of our congregation, of our church, within for religious freedom advocacy. Human rights is something that young people latch onto and relate to. And so I really want the young people of our church to be able to recognize the tie between human rights and religious freedom. Particularly, I think that they, and so I want NARLA to, I'm hoping, and I've tried to be deliberate about the way that we position NARLA and communicate NARLA. We are to do that. This last year, when we had the Religious Liberty Summit or Religious Freedom Summit in California, our theme was a social justice theme. And social justice and religious freedom are really natural allies and tie-ins, particularly when you add the public affairs side of religious liberty and the work that we do there. And I think that that's worked. We've seen success as far as that goes. What we are, as far as attracting the young people, or them recognizing the need for religious freedom, particularly when we tie in the international aspect of religious freedom. I think there's a tougher sell domestically, as far as them recognizing domestic religious freedom issues. But what we've been trying to do is start NARLA chapters on our Seventh-day Adventist campuses, college campuses. And we had some success with that. But unfortunately, what happens, we had a chapter at Oakwood University, and then we've had one at Union College, and we had one at Pacific Union College and in Andrews. And all of them were successful for a short period of time, but then what happens is the students that were leading out graduate. And that student who is deliberate about training up and mentoring that next student leader into the leadership role at the chapter, into the next leadership position there. So we do have challenges. We have someone who was a student leader, of the NARLA chapter at the Andrews University position, who is now who now heads our social media for NARLA. He handles it both for NARLA and Liberty, and does a great job. He's actually a local pastor in Florida, and so we have a very active Facebook presence thanks to him for both of those organizations. But we do need to look at I think rebranding, definitely need to redesign the NARLA the NARLA website. So I think we're in a bit of a transition stage as far as NARLA goes, but we I think it's something that can only continue to grow and develop and get better. And so with that in mind, I have lots of ideas for how you all can help us do that. And so that handout that I just gave you is about how if you would like to help us grow and start a local and NARLA chapter, here are some things that you could do at that local NARLA chapter. So first of all, sponsor a seminar or a chapter or Vespers or an assembly. This is from the perspective of, if you're a local student or if you're a local, if you're a local church member, or assembly speaker on religious liberty related topics, and then possible local government official, local civil rights or attorney or law professor or local pastor. Yes, sir.
I had shared this once quite a few years ago. I was speaking to someone, and that someone happened to know 2 religious liberty lawyers down in Philadelphia, and we brought them up for that that particular Sabbath, and I mean it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, the fire didn't burn as long as I would like to have, but yeah, that works. That works.
Perfect. Has anyone else had a similar experience where you've had something you could share with the others? Number 2 is I had host a multi-faith panel discussion, panel discussing coexistence, particularly from the perspective of those who have previously experienced persecution. So again, I think having several different faith groups, New York is a great place to do this, and I think easy to be able to just get together several different faith groups. I mean, unfortunately, with the shooting that we just saw in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, yeah, recognizing that there's still hate in this world is, this is a time-sensitive topic. But to be able to grab people, or and to participate in a panel, I think should be easy enough to do, and have that discussion. And I think it would be helpful to a community for them to recognize, for other faith leaders, for them to recognize that, the Seventh-day Adventist Church wants to host that conversation, Number 3 is host an author reading of a recent religious liberty book or article, or host a book club featuring religious liberty, religious freedom titles. So, book clubs are popular. If you don't want to do a whole book, you could do an article. We share articles with each other all the time. So just encourage dialogue. So I shared with our Sabbath school class yesterday a book that we're reading on the Holy Spirit right now. But, just, it's a top, just something that it's easy enough to find religious liberty books. We can, any of us can list suggestions of good religious liberty titles of books or articles. We can post those on, we can use that email list or forum. Claude or Lawrence, we could probably list some titles that would be relevant there that we could share. but just if individuals, again, we don't have to limit this to our local congregation. You know, we all live close enough to each other, and we all have, we all have access online. You can do all of this stuff online too. So you can have an online book club. My friends and I went to Andrews University, and we graduated, and we wanted to have an online book club, but you know, one of us lived in Chicago, and two of us lived in Maryland, and one of us lived in Michigan. So we had our online book club virtually, you know, and we did it for like 3 years. So yes, you're the local religious liberty leader, but you can also do things virtually as well. Sponsor a movie night for religious liberty related movie, drama, or documentary, and then hold a discussion afterwards. And then I said, you don't have to completely agree with a filmmaker's take on religious liberty. A lot of times that encourages the discussion. So obviously watch the film before you show it to, you know, just like as a parent, you watch the movie before you show it to your kids. But I listed several titles here. A lot of them are free available for download or whatever. But you don't have to agree with everything. And like I said, I think that encourages the discussion. I think you don't just show the movie. I think you encourage having a conversation afterwards, because like those movies that are out right now about God isn't dead or something like that. God's not dead, yeah. I watched one of those, and they're very sort of like black and white, extreme sort of points of view. They're not very nuanced in their religious freedom perspectives. That's my 15-second review of those. But again, that encourages discussion. Do you understand what I'm saying? As far as like, and that is the point, to then have a conversation afterwards of, well, what did you take away from that conversation? You know, but again, if I'm not encouraging anybody to watch dramas if your church is not comfortable with that. If everybody's more comfortable watching documentaries, there's great PBS. The Conscientious, First Freedom documentary is there. The Conscientious Objector, Desmond Doss, is a great movie that's available. Yeah. There's got a microphone.
Oh. Yeah, I showed this last year for our Religious Liberty.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
In the afternoon, and
you're like the star Religious Liberty director. I'm telling you, you're gonna.
Thank you. Although anyway, let me move on. This was an awesome documentary. I mean, there's someone who agrees he's seen it. Watch it, please. If you haven't seen it and you're a Religious Liberty leader here, put it in your program next year, please.
It's available for purchase from the ABC, and I always keep a couple copies, so if you're having a program at your church and you want to borrow it to show, I'm more than happy to do that. And because you're my friend, I won't even charge you.
Yeah. No, it's really well done. So there's one that I just saw. I think it might be a short, like a short film, but I haven't seen the movie. But it's again, it's a documentary. But I just saw the preview. But it's like an Academy Award nominee for an international film, and it was actually about. I'm not going to go into this because I won't remember the title, and I won't remember. So I would just be describing something, and then you wouldn't be able to find it. So never mind. Next time when I come back, I'll have the title for you. But anyway, the point is, there's lots of available resources, whether it's books or movies. And my point is, well beyond Religious Liberty Sabbath, here's some options for you, to get in front of your church members. Okay, conduct a student debate on religious liberty topic. And I originally had this in here for my my college campuses, but then I left that in there because I thought, again, we want to engage our young people in our local church levels. And kids kids love to debate, don't they? I mean, parents love to debate too, and this is encouraging them. So if we give them, for an AY session or something, if you give them some topics, I think that would be something that would be neat to see play out. A pro and a con for, yes for the separation of church and state, maybe. I don't know. I'd like to see how that would work. Number 6, invite an individual who has experienced religious discrimination or persecution to share their story. We've mentioned that a couple times. 7, host a campus or local church religious liberty emphasis week. And number 8, hand out postcards featuring different religious liberty stories or profiles of individuals who are experiencing religious persecution with ways to help. So many of you might remember Pastor Andrew Brunson this last year, the pastor in Turkey, the Christian pastor. So again, we don't always have to feature Seventh-day Adventists who are experiencing religious persecution. In fact, we shouldn't always feature Seventh-day Adventists who are experiencing persecution. So, if we have, information, again, and we can share this information here in our local church. We can just print off a little postcard or a flyer and share about this person. And we can, share it in our local, just like we would do like a glow track or something even. Share it in our local church, share it out in the community, and just ask people to pray for this situation. I think that's another way of witnessing, another way of evangelism. And then finally, number 9, hand out balloons with prayers for a specific country for religious freedom. And again, I think that's just another way to sort of remind yourself that you're sending up prayers to God for a specific situation. And so what was the situation? Okay. And where are we now as far as time? Because my voice is getting a little dry. Okay. Well, I keep drinking it. Yes, sir.
Number 6, invite an individual who has experienced religious. Thank you. Number 6, invite an individual who has experienced religious discrimination or persecution to share their story. There's a lady at my job who is Muslim. I had the privilege of training her a little bit in certain areas. And she had come from another bus company. And now I know why. As I was training her, we service a community, very well-to-do people. And a lot of the kids would not get on the bus or were afraid to get on the bus because she wore and I was stunned at the actually the parents actually called the school district asking them to kick her out because they were afraid of her because she wore and I'm just wondering, maybe I can bring her in and
That'd
ask
be perfect.
her.
Yeah.
Ask her
Perfect.
how she felt, because I felt bad for her because I can see the anguish on her face. All she's doing is doing her job.
Yeah.
She's just doing her job.
Yeah.
But the people, and they actually had to move her from a few districts because there were certain, parents who didn't like her.
Wow.
Not because they knew her, but because of the way she dressed.
Yeah.
They made assumptions that were unfounded. But
this really highlights what our speaker's been hammering home all day, the level of ignorance that's out there and the unfortunate way that it plays out shows why initiatives like what you are being challenged to do as local directors really gives you an opportunity to have impact in your community. And perhaps just to not totally eat up her voice before lunchtime, you've had a chance to share some things that you've been able to successfully do. And I'm just wondering, we've talked about the campaign, we've talked about Narland. Is there anybody else here who has seen some local initiatives done in your church that you'd like to share? I don't see Brother Scott here. Brother Scott is from the Linden Church. And what I'd like to share with you that I've seen them do there in an effort to promote greater involvement, his church has conducted essay contests for the young people. And they've done that for a few years now, and it's always very enthusiastically received. They'll pick a topic each year dealing with religious liberty. They'll challenge the young people to write an essay on it. And everybody gets something, but there is a first place and a second place. And so that's something that I know they've had good success with. And another thing they've been very good about is targeting people in the community who have been active in the area of religious liberty and bring them in, because what begins to happen, church members realize that we're not on an island by ourselves, and people in the community realize, hey, here's this group of people who share a lot of the priorities that I share as it relates to freedoms, and so you begin to network, and it's a very good collaborative experience. But those are just some of the things I've seen. Is there anybody else who at their local church has had an opportunity to try some of the things she's discussing, and what kind of results you've gotten back from it? There's one director, I was hoping he would be here today. He's been a director for a long time, and I know that his church, 1 year with their promotion, they were so successful they had over 700 subscriptions that they did. The point is, if you get creative in your initiatives, and if you get creative in your promotion of the ministry, there's no limit to what you can accomplish. And you've got young people sitting in your church, they just need the right spark lit under them, that's all. So somebody who may not have ever done anything or said anything, if you give them the right motivation, you'll discover that they'll wholeheartedly embrace this and do some wonderful things with it. Yes.
So I think I'm going to go ahead and have us just break for lunch now, if that's okay, and we can just take a few minutes to talk and head on down, and we can just wait down there. I am going to ask us to say a special word of prayer. I was just texting with my boss, so just to share a little bit about what we're doing this morning down in Maryland. We are having a produce giveaway. So part of the work that we do, and what we're going to start this afternoon, is talking about the work of the public affairs side of our office. And I think that can be a critical component of your work as religious liberty leaders, because part of your work as ambassadors is representing your local church and Christ in your community. And so part of our work as ambassadors there for the Seventh-day Adventist Church is we've just recently moved to a new community. And so this is the third time that we have done a produce giveaway. And so for the cost of a refrigerated truck coming to our location, to our office, we are able to give away 25,000 pounds of fresh produce, which is pretty incredible. It costs about $300 for us to get that produce. Basically, it's from a local food distributor to some local grocery stores there, and it's basically the local grocery stores have whatever they've over-ordered that week, it's just left over. So think about all the waste of wasted food that just gets thrown away every week. But we get that food, and it's like organic. I mean, it's like kale and spinach and all, you know, all those boxed produce, you know, bananas, and right now it's like root vegetables, and we get like mangoes, but we don't know what it's going to be until it arrives, because we don't know what they will have over ordered. But anyway, we did it last year for Thanksgiving, and then we did a spring one, and now today we're doing another one, a Thanksgiving one. But anyway, I've just been texting with my boss, with our director, Orlin, about it, and the first time, it was supposed to start at 10 a.m. this morning, and he said, according to our security team, we had people waiting in the parking lot at 7:30 this morning for this produce, which is heartbreaking, because that means that there's a real need for this food. And also surprising, because where our office is located is in Howard County, Maryland, which is one of the most affluent counties in the United States. And oftentimes we don't do things like this because we don't think that there are people in need, because we think, well, it's just rich people that live there. They don't need this, you know, but there are pockets of need everywhere, and it's easy to overlook those individuals. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to ask for special prayer right now is because evidently the truck, delivery truck that was supposed to be there at 9 a.m. Was stopped at the weight station and was too heavy, and has not arrived yet, and it's 12 o'clock. And so it's now on its way, but the last message that I got from him, it says not released but from state police, or not yet, but released by state police and on its way. And so it's 2 hours late, and some people have been there since 7:30 this morning. And so I just want to say a prayer that the individuals, you know, that hopefully that were there this morning have stayed there. The last message that I saw before that one was at 10:30, and he said that they had been giving out numbers and that they were up to 150 people that had stuck around, and that was 2 hours before that message. So I don't know who all stuck around, but anyway, that's what I want to include, is those individuals, because, you know, that's part of our witness as well, that, you know, these are individuals that we care about and want to communicate God's love to as well. So anyway, maybe if we can just all stand, we'll ask for a blessing on the food. Yes?
Thank you. As soon as we finish the blessing, let me suggest if everybody could come forward instead of going out, we could get a group picture with Melissa, and it would be helpful for us to have that preserve our record of our event today. Could I just put in one thought that has come to me since we have a moment? I mentioned earlier my concern about not honoring people without knowing what we're talking about. But the other thing that is very real possibility or real opportunity, we always think about what we might share with people, but think about what people might share with us. If you want to ask one of your government officials to come and explain what the policy of the community is for accommodation, or whatever thing you'd like to have them tell you about their relationship with the community or their role in the government. But ask them to come and say, would you come and please take 5-10 minutes, whatever you want to have them do.
Yeah.
But to share information, because you know, communication often in today's environment, everybody's got too much information coming to them. They're usually very responsive to the fact when they are given an opportunity to give some feedback. So it's another opportunity. I don't know whether,
that's an excellent point. I love that. Yep.
I don't know whether you were intending to have the prayer or whether you wanted.
You've got the mic.
I've got the mic. Okay. Okay. So let's stand and have a prayer for this food sharing and also a blessing for our meal. Father in heaven, thank you for bringing us together here. Thank you for the blessing that Melissa has brought to us. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of the mission that you have for your church and for your building your kingdom. Please continue to guide us as we go on through the discussion and presentation this afternoon. And now we thank you for the food that is available. I ask you to bless the meal, bless us as we share it. And as we think about the meal that we've enjoyed, we think about the people who waited there for hours for a helping hand with produce. Please guide the truck and bring it there as quickly as possible, and guide the group that's waiting. Your Spirit can touch their hearts and give them peace of mind that this is a circumstance that's unavoidable, but one that they can survive. Guide and work for good in all that's happening there. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
If you'll come forward, we'd like to get you in the picture. Is it still on? It is. One other thing I wanted to share with you. Denise De Silva, who I just handled the phone to, is helped to coordinate in the way. If you thought things went really smoothly when you came in this morning, it's entirely her fault. She got in here and helped to make a chaos into a good organized reception. And the other thing I'd like to say is the church has been phenomenal. Jeremiah with the sound, Sister Charles downstairs with the food. Everybody has been just helping and making this a wonderfully successful event. I thank you all.
You are this afternoon.
You have marching orders.
Lunch is downstairs.
One upstairs is locked. Oh, they unlocked it now? Okay, good.
Thank you, Denise.
So if you have an emergency, go upstairs. You just have to go, you can go downstairs.
If anybody from Northeastern is not coming back after lunch, please see us before you go. I want to make sure you have your Liberty Bonds as well. You have your packet. We want to give you some Liberty Bonds to take with you.
Okay. By the way, speaking of things, take your prayer downstairs with you because we're